So Matt Ryall is the longest serving Atlassian employee to speak on this track, and he joined Atlassian in 2006. He began his career at Atlassian as senior developer for Confluence, and he has had just about every title on the food chain up to head of engineering for Confluence, which is his role now. In addition to that, he speaks Swedish, and he's a big-time rugby fan. Thanks.
Thank you. All right, good afternoon, everyone. Everyone having a great summit so far? Really awesome, yeah. I'm really excited to be here today to talk to you about distributed teams and a little bit about the stuff that we've learned in the Confluence team and at Atlassian over the last year, bringing up a new team in Vietnam. But before I get into that, I wanted to tell you a bit of a story about how I got started out in business. So back when I was 16, I was part of a small company formed with other 16-year-olds as a young enterprise group. And so it's a gathering of about 20 teenagers. They get together every week, start running a company, raise some capital, and build a real product. They have mentors from other local companies. And the product that we built was a wheat field heat pack that looks kind of like this. So these things are really easy to make, which is great for a small company to put together. So you buy some fabric, buy some material, sew it up into a bag, fill it up with wheat, and put it together that way. So with the help of the mentor, I was the manufacturing director for this small company. And we looked at optimizing how we could produce the heat packs as fast as possible. And so with their help, we improved the templates that we used to cut the fabric. We set up a little production line with the sewing machines. We set up some scales. We bought like massive bags of wheat. And eventually we had like a really good production line going. It looked kind of like this. And we were like churning out hundreds of these things per hour. So that was one of my earliest experiences in business. And so when I got to looking after the Confluence team, I pretty much set things up in the office exactly like this. So we have a production line, devs hand things from one to each other, and then when it gets to the end of the production line, we give it to the customers. Of course not. That's not how software development works at all. I don't think any modern team works like this. And in fact, one of the things that I found when I was talking to people about distributed teams and how to work with remote teams is that people focus a lot on the processes and the tools, and actually distributed teams are a lot more about people and individuals instead. So who's familiar with the Agile Manifesto here? Everybody heard of that? Yeah? Anyone know any of the values of the Agile Manifesto? What's that? People over process, that's a good one. Any others? Working code over documentation is another good one. But the one I want to talk about today is that first one, individuals and interactions over processes and tools. And that's so important when you have a distributed team. It's really easy to get caught up in what's the best tools, how can we set things up in a process that's going to work for distributed teams. And you forget about the individuals and the interactions between people that are so important in software development and in many other industries where you're trying to work in a distributed fashion. So I'll tell you a bit of a story about how we got started with distributed teams at Atlassian. So my boss is JML, Jean-Michel. He came to me, he's the VP of engineering, and he said, "Hey Matt, I got this great idea. Let's start a new development center for Atlassian in Asia. And how about we kick it off with the Confluence team? You guys have just been sitting there, not doing very much lately. It's about time you did something new and exciting." Being the excited dev manager that I was, I'm like, "No worries, mate, we can do that. Let's give it a shot." But on the inside, I was worried. I had a lot of concerns about how we were going to make this work, concerns about the code quality, the level of English skills that we'd have working with a remote team. What if their code is bad? How are we going to manage these things? And so what I want to take you through today is how we answered those questions over the last year or two. So we went through a selection process with a large number of companies. About 80 different companies applied to be our partner. And we went through a process of interviewing them. We asked them to complete a trial project, a pilot project, so that we could see how good their development skills were and how they actually implement products, whether they have that sense of what customers want, features and things like that. And actually, out of the finalists, we ended up with 7 finalists that we went to visit, spread across Asia. And the 3 of the finalists were in Saigon, in Vietnam. And the thing that impressed us most about the guys in Vietnam was they were really enthusiastic, and they're also really opinionated. And that really helped us find a good feature team there. They could take something that was really just a vague set of requirements or comments from customers, and they turned it into a working label management plugin, which is our pilot project. Anyway, after a while, we settled on that team. Saigon's about 3 to 4 hours away from Sydney, about 8.5 hours by flight. And so the first thing that we did, and the first thing that I'd recommend you do if you have a distributed team, is go and meet the team. So I talked to a lot of people again about distributed teams. What baffles me is how many people manage or work really closely with a distributed team and they have never been to meet their team. They have 10 people in Hyderabad in India. They've been working with them for 2 years. They've never met any of them face to face. And I think that's really bad, because before you're getting on a conference call and you've missed your deadline and things are running late and you've got to have an unhappy conversation with someone, it's much better if you can take them out for a drink first, go to dinner, make that social connection before you have to get angry at someone or work together on a critical thing. So who here works with a distributed team and they've never met the team members on the other side of the world? Yeah, so first tip to you, go back to your boss and say, look, if we really want to work effectively with these people, we need to go over there, we need to meet them. And some of the things you do when you meet them are not even what you'd expect. Like, we went there and we helped them start their stand-up meetings, just so they know how we run agile teams at Atlassian. It's one of those things that unless you're there in person, it's really hard to get them to have that energy in the morning, passing around a token, feel like you can focus on the right things so it's not like a 30-minute status report from each person. We also checked out the office space, making sure they set up the desks and the things in a way that makes sense for the way we work. As I mentioned, it's good to have a beer with people, go out, share some dinner, share some food, build that social connection so that before you have to have a conflict over something or you have a shared deadline that you're working together towards, you have that shared connection, a personal connection with the people in that office. So once we had the team, we had to work out what kind of work to give them. And this is another thing where I've seen a lot of teams stumble when they first set up a new distributed team. The work that we decided to give the team was clearly separate from the work that the team was already doing. And the reason for this is that it gives the new team some autonomy, an area of responsibility, and there's less clashes in things like people waiting for someone else to finish up their work before they can start. We wanted it to have a minimal learning curve. So in their case, we decided that they shouldn't work on the core product, but they should work on one of the add-ons or the plugins that are actually outside the core code of Confluence. And again, that's helped minimize the learning curve, help them get up to speed faster so that we can make them feel more confident in their work. And the last point is that it shouldn't be the most critical piece of work that you need to do right now. And another thing that amazes me is when companies will set up a new outsourcing operation, they'll go and hire 50 developers in some remote Asian location, and then they'll put them on the most business critical project that they have to deliver in 6 months, otherwise the company's going to go broke. And that's not really a good idea. What you want is you want something that's important, valuable to the company, fits with the strategy, but you don't want something that's going to make the company fall over if they don't deliver it on time. You need to give them time and space to learn, and you need to really factor that into your project selection and what you give those guys to start with, particularly in the first 6 to 12 months. So we came up with a 6-month mission for our team. They were going to take the Jira issues macro and all the Jira integration in Confluence and turn it into some sexy new design. They overhauled the back end of all the Jira integration, implemented that highlight and create issue functionality that we've been talking about over the last year, a huge bunch of Jira-related functionality. And that carved out, like I said, a nice piece of functionality. It was separate to the core of Confluence. It was not critical in that if they missed their deadline by a week or two, it wasn't going to be a big deal. And it gave them independence and autonomy. My next tip is when you go over there and visit the team, particularly when you're getting started, is to share the plan that you have for them, to teach the guys about what you want them to do, but also share your values with the team. So one of the biggest challenges with sharing culture across geographic locations is that it's not easy to absorb that stuff by osmosis. So someone actually has to go there or present to them on the values and the culture that you want to create in that new location. So you start with the plan, sharing the plan. Using Confluence is a great way to do this. And we're really happy to see that straight away we had like 25 comments on our spec from the remote team. They were asking for more clarification on a lot of things. We could go back and have a really detailed discussion there and get into the nuts and bolts of everything that they were going to build. And the other thing that we shared was our values and our history. So this presentation was a history of what the Confluence team has been working on recently. It talked a bit about what our strategy was, how we're executing on that, what our plans are over the next year. And this helped fill the team in on like 6 or 12 months of history for the team. It told them where they're going. It gives a lot of context. And I keep coming back to this word context. Context is really what you're trying to create for across a distributed team. And it's what really is missing when you have teams that are separated geographically. Another presentation that we gave was our engineering values presentation. And so this talks about how we build software, why we think we've been successful, and things that are really internal to Atlassian, things that we don't talk about a lot of this stuff publicly, and it's stuff that we need the team to understand when they're coming on board. The other thing that we had in our values, in our philosophy, was an engagement model that we were using for our new remote team. So this went through a series of stages, and we wanted to present this to the team right from the beginning so they understood what we wanted. And the first step was really establishing a dev team, a team that had those core development skills, could ship code on time with high quality. And so those were the things we were focused on for the first 6 months. And every time we add a new team, we're focused on this to start with. We add the developers first, maybe a BA, and we focus on getting the development skills working, productive, iterating, and working with the team properly before we start adding more capacity and more capabilities to the team. The second step is product decision making. And that's where we take a team that's working well as a development shop and we start adding product management, design capabilities, and really getting that team to go to the next level of owning a feature, understanding why they're doing it. That's the product manager's role. And design is helping define the way that the customer will use the system. So in the earlier stages in Dev Foundation, we're writing the spec, like you saw before. We're providing the mock-ups. What happens as we move into that second stage is they're writing the spec. They're talking to customers more and more. And ideally, we want the team eventually to be fully autonomous. So they're taking a strategic direction from our company, and they're able to execute on that independently with minimal guidance and oversight from the headquarters. And so this process helps, we factor this into everything that we're doing with the remote team. So we have an evaluation process that I'll tell you about in a minute. And we use these stages to help gauge where the team's at, and it helps them feel like they're on a journey with us. They're here to work with us over the next 2 to 5 years, however long it takes, till they get to the point where they're working autonomously and own pieces of the products or even whole products. So once the teams are ready to get going, we encourage them to kind of get started by starting a blog at Atlassian. So we use blogs for internal announcements, and the Vietnam team has a great blog where they keep the team up to date with everything that's going on. This is their first announcement, some photos of the team, just introducing them to everyone. It's a great way to share things out with the wider company and get people involved in the process. So once you have the team going and starting to work on things, another key aspect is to have frequent face-to-face contact. That's my third tip to you. So what does that mean in practice? We have daily stand-ups with our teams. So if there's a team that's split between locations, we'll try and find a time zone overlap there, or maybe some people have to work late in order to have a stand-up with the team. And that's really important because it's, again, the daily contact, building those relationships between people. Anatoly here has got a team in Vietnam and a team in Sydney. And so every day he's connecting with his teams and watching what's going on, making sure that things that are blocking the teams aren't getting lost between the cracks. And he can do that every day with his team, which is great. The technology that makes this possible is really important as well. So these are, we use life-size VC units, and they're really actually quite cheap. So there's really no reason that you can't roll these out. We have about half our meeting rooms in Sydney, so probably about 20 meeting rooms have video conferencing facilities. And they cost like about $4,000 each for one of those things that has a camera. You can plug in your computer, you can do high definition screen sharing, multiple video inputs as well. And that it's amazing because you can have you can have a meeting with those guys and it feels like they're in the room. The other technology we use is called BlueJeans, which is I think it's a startup from around here in the Bay Area. And those guys build interoperability for VC software. So what this is for letting people who are working from home or out of the office, they can dial into our VC units and be engaged in the meetings as well. And so it's not unusual for us at Atlassian. We'll have maybe 2 or 3 officers dialed into the VC unit, and then we'll also have 4 or 5 individuals who are out in different locations calling in through BlueJeans to watch the same presentation. And again, that's keeping everyone on the same page, just giving them that context to understand what's going on, make the right decisions, and move forward with confidence. I also encourage all my managers and all the product managers on the team to have regular catch-ups with everyone that's in their team. Booking the VC meeting rooms is difficult sometimes, but we try to set up new rooms as the existing ones fill up. My rule of thumb for catching up with people regularly is that if you're catching up with people on some frequency, say it's every 2 weeks locally, for the same relationship that you have remotely, you should do it twice as often. So if you catch up with your direct reports for a one-on-one meeting, maybe every week, you should probably do it twice a week with your remote people. And for any relationship that's important, remote teams, you need to catch up once a week. Otherwise, too much can happen when you don't have that incidental contact. Schedule a meeting once a week. Make sure you're catching up with your remote team members as often as possible. For frequent one-on-one contact, HipChat video is a great way to do that as well. It really integrates well into our workflow where we have HipChat for group discussions, and then it's easy just to jump into a video chat. But maybe more importantly is the high resolution screen sharing that we get with HipChat too. And so we see developers using this to share code, to collaborate on code across locations. And this is something that is actually really hard to do with some of the alternatives like Google Hangouts, where the resolution just isn't there for dealing with screen sharing and things like that. So we're really pumped about the video features in HipChat, and I hope you guys will check it out. Another less technical way of getting face-to-face contact is to have an exchange program. So our exchange program has allowed the developers on the Confluence team, both in Vietnam and in Sydney, to travel to the other office for 1 to 2 months. And the reason why we can do this is because we plan a lot in advance, these things. So we're able to get the budget approved. We can arrange apartments, which are cheaper than hotels for people to stay at when they're traveling to the other location. And when the team's there, the team members are there, we come up with a set of goals and objectives for everyone for when they travel. So they have a pretty packed itinerary for the time that they're there, meeting up with people, doing pair programming, learning the code. And this is really important as not just a knowledge exchange, but a cultural exchange too. So people, by coming to the Sydney office, we hope they're taking a piece of Atlassian back to the new office in Saigon. And likewise, the people that we transplant in from Sydney that go over to Saigon, they can be there as a knowledge resource, but also to kind of get the team more engaged, take some of the cultural aspects of it that's from our headquarters. So here's an example where we, taking our beer o'clock celebration on Friday afternoon, taking that over to Vietnam is not something they do regularly. We can just take it there, give them an idea, and now the guys do their own kind of karaoke nights and things like that. So they take those ideas that have come from the headquarters, they adapt them, and create their own identity in the new office. One thing that I like to do is go hiking, and something you see when you're out in the wilderness sometimes is these logbooks. And a logbook is a way to kind of record information about who's walking along a trail. And as you look back, you arrive at a place, you can see who's been there over the previous days and weeks. You can know where they're heading, and the emergency services can also use this if someone gets lost in the wilderness. A logbook like this is actually really useful for a distributed team because you want to know what the team's been working on. When you come in the morning, you've had people working overnight, maybe in a different time zone. And that's really about asynchronous communication. So for us, our primary asynchronous communication is HipChat, and HipChat's our logbook. So we have a group chat there in HipChat, and everybody is in the same group chat, both offices, And there's a history there of the build results, things that people have been talking about. And when you come in the morning, you can actually see, oh, what were those guys working on? Oh, they had a question that wasn't answered. Well, I'll reply now. And if they're not around at the moment, they'll get an email about the answer to their question. And what that does is it helps, again, bring the team together. Everyone's on the same page. They have context about what each location is working on. You can feed in a bunch of information into HipChat too. So you can see there's some build results going in. You can also have your Jira tickets obviously feeding in, commit messages, things like that. And all that information, again, is just sharing more context with the team, showing them what each other are working on, and keeping everybody up to date with what's happening. So we don't just have one room in HipChat. You could see that this is my list of insane number of HipChat rooms that I have open. There's team rooms, like I mentioned. We have rooms for events, social rooms. We have a Vietnamese office room. We have one where the Vietnamese guys talk to each other in Vietnamese, which is great too, because they can organize things in their social groups. And one I wanted to call out in particular is incident management. So a lot of companies have quite archaic processes for incident management, where if something goes wrong, production server goes down, you've got to get everyone on a phone call, and you've got to talk to the people. You've got to get people up at night somewhere else. They maybe don't have a conference phone at home, so they have to get into the office, and there's it can be a nightmare. Sometimes you have multiple phone calls. You have the business phone call, you have the technical phone call, and it's really hard to synchronize the two and for people to find out what's going on. So what we do is we do incident chat rooms on HipChat, and I think they're so superior to every other form of incident management. The reason being that you can have the technical and the business people in one place. The developers can be dropping things like error messages or links to more information straight into the chat room. It doesn't clutter it up. Like if developers are dropping long error messages in there, like HipChat condenses it down, so it's just a really short message. So, and we see our CEOs jumping into these incident rooms, not to write comments or anything, just to be up to date with what's going on. And they feel connected. They feel like they know the incident's being worked on, and that's all the management team's really after a lot of the time. They just want to know that people are treating it with urgency. And so HipChat gives them that visibility that the team is working on it. People are doing something right now about this problem. So that's my tip if you're involved in any kind of incident management or dealing with production issues at your company. Another great way to use HipChat is to use the room topics. So that's another asynchronous form of communication there. Here's the Confluence dev room. You can see we have like branch information in the topic. We have people who are responsible for key systems. And again, that's just keeping that information live there and where people need it. Really helps when you have a distributed team because it saves a lot of those questions that might take 24 hours to answer if you don't have a time zone overlap with your teams. Another pro tip for HipChat users out there is the @here mention. So when you have a distributed team, only some people are going to be online at any point in time. So @here mentions only the people that are online at the moment, and it sends them a notification if they have their chat client running. So it won't be emailing or pinging people who are at home asleep. It only messages people who have their statuses available right now. And that's great for distributed teams. You don't want those guys in Poland waking up everyone in Sydney every time they have a question. So we use @here instead of @all. It's a really useful feature. Another tip on HipChat is to make sure that people can lurk in the channels and absorb that information without getting overwhelmed with notifications. So we recommend in our team that people turn off these settings here in HipChat. Keep the mentions on, keep the private messages on, but turn off those room notifications so that you can sit in a room with 60, 80 people and it's not going to be disruptive to your daily work. You can just pop in and out when you're interested in something. Another great asynchronous tool for collaboration is Confluence. I'm a big fan of Confluence, as you can guess. The one I wanted to talk about today is something that you might think of, not think of doing asynchronously, which is retrospectives. So normally retrospectives, you kind of get the team in the room, you talk about your issues, hopefully you come up with a set of outcomes. One way that we see Confluence being used for this is with the retrospective blueprint. And what that lets you do is you create the retrospective blueprint, you have what did we do well, what have we done better, and you actually collect that over a period of days. So you send that out to the team, The team can put their own feedback on the page. And then you can see here we actually can vote for them asynchronously as well. So we put like a little smiley face or a frowny face next to the items to say which one we're worried about. And then you could even go to the next stage of suggesting actions via the Confluence comments or something like that as well. In our case, what we'll do is we'll usually get to this stage. We'll have a video conference with all the teams together, and then we'll work through a set of actions that the team agrees to improve their process. There's obviously a bunch of other things you can do with Confluence as well. You can collect meeting minutes and lots of stuff. I'd really encourage you to think about your dev process. Think about what stages have to be done face-to-face or together at the moment, and work out what you can do, putting stuff in a system like Confluence or HipChat that's going to let you communicate asynchronously and improve the efficiency of the distributed team. So yeah, it wasn't all butterflies and unicorns with a distributed team, as you can imagine. We had some interesting problems as we went along. So the first real big one was we got a bunch of customers reporting performance issues with the Jira macro. So we just shipped this to our cloud customers, and it wasn't working well at all. Like customers that had like 5 or 6 Jira issues on a page, or even more potentially, like it would slow down the instance to a crawl. Nobody could use anything. Pages were timing out. It was really bad. So we dug into this a little bit. We're like, where did this bug come from? It turned out what we'd done was the code change was just a change from this old static ugly view over to the new dynamic sexy view. And the situation that had led to that code change was the Sydney team had decided we wanted to change the default. So we said, hey guys, can you go and change the default setting for this macro? We want it to look pretty now by default rather than ugly. Fair enough. The team in Saigon's like, yeah, no worries, we'll get that, we'll do that. They did it, and they shipped it, and the performance sucked. And what happened there was that the team in Saigon had assumed that the Sydney team had thought through all the ramifications of the change. So we'd asked them to do something. They assumed that we knew the product better than they did, which is true, and therefore they assumed that we'd thought through all the consequences, and they didn't need to do any planning or anything around that change. They could just jump in and make it straight away. And on our side, we assumed that when we ask someone to do something, they're going to go and do their own due diligence on it and make sure it's the right thing to do before they go ahead and do it. So I'll tell you how we solved that in a second. We also hit another issue, which is as we rushed out the fix for that first issue, the team pushed out the change to the performance issue, and it broke the macro completely. So we had another week, or maybe a few days, where we had a version of the Jira issues macro that wasn't working properly. This time it wasn't showing any data at all. So what had happened on this one is that because the previous issue was so important, so critical, the guys didn't get a code review, or didn't follow the full dev process on our change, and they pushed it out in production as fast as they could, and they broke the whole thing. And so we'll come back in a second to, again, how do we fix that? How do we make that team understand that when we say we want something fixed really fast, we want it fast, but we also want it to work. So I'll come back to that in a sec. So on the first one, around the performance problem and how we deal with that, my suggestion to you is really track decisions and write up the thinking behind your decisions. And fortunately, we have a solution for this, which is the decision blueprint. This came from our own processes at Atlassian, this blueprint. And what we do here is, like, when we decide something, whether it's in Sydney, in Saigon, or a shared decision, we write up a page that covers the background for the decision, the pros and cons, the different options evaluated, and this gives people context around why we're doing something. And if we'd done something like this for the change from static to dynamic mode for the Jira macro, then when the team that was going to work on it looks through this decision page, they could have seen that we didn't think about performance at all. There was no question what the performance impact would be, and then they would think to go, performance, that's on our list to check whenever we implement a feature, so we're going to make sure that we cover that off with some performance testing before we ship it. And the other thing about these decision pages, if you drop them in Confluence, is you can actually get a whole summary of all the decisions that the team has been making. And where this comes in really useful is evaluating the team's decision making. So one of the aspects of our evolution there, moving from a dev team to an autonomous team, is improving the skill of the team with regard to decision making. So this decision tracking page really it's invaluable when it's time to review how the team's going. The other thing we had to do to fix the dev process issue where they would, the team skipped some steps in the process in order to get a fix out really fast, is to reinforce the culture. And this is something we've had to do continually through the process of growing the team there. This is not just a once-off thing. We had our product managers, that's Sharif, who's over in the next room actually presenting. Oh, you saw him in the keynote this morning. He's presenting Think Like a PM presentation to our Saigon team. And we had people go over and do similar presentations, Think Like a QA engineer, and talk about how our process for QA works at Atlassian. Think like a developer. What do you need to think about when you're building features for our products? And we've had to run these pretty much every quarter over the last year as we get new people on board to just reinforce that culture every time. It's amazing as well, like you give a presentation like this and there's, as you can see, like 100% attendance. Like everybody in the office is there to learn more about how we do things because they really want to improve, they're really enthusiastic. And if you give them the chance to do that, the team will grow in experience much faster. It's even better if you can do it face-to-face like this as well. What we've seen is that the team will then ask questions a lot more. They'll be a lot more engaged. You get a lot more back and forth with the people if you can actually get some of your key leaders there in person to help train up the team. My next tip to you is to be overly inclusive and think about the ways that you might be excluding your remote team members in normal daily activities. So the first example of this is we do innovation days at Atlassian, and right from the beginning we tried to include all the distributed teams in our innovation days. We even went as far one time to try and synchronize them in time, so we would have a global final at the 1 hour that happened to be everybody was kind of awake, almost awake, and get everybody on the same VC system to do that. That didn't work so well for the Polish guys who had to get into the office at 7 a.m. and present their project. They're a little less enthusiastic about that. So we've gone back to kind of doing it locally, but synchronizing it in time, just on the same days of the week, so that the competitions are all running together and people feel like it's a global initiative. The other thing that we've seen from doing this is like the team actually surprised us. We have this award called the Customer Kick-Ass Award. And what that is in Sydney, we get 2 or 3 customers along to the finals of our Ship It Hackathon Day. And they get to vote on the project that they think is best from their point of view as a customer. And our Vietnam team won 2 out of the last 3 Customer Kick-Ass Awards. And so we had to actually put the trophy in a suitcase and ship it over to them so that they could have it in their office for the last 6 months. So again, they surprised us. They've done a great job with all the Ship It competitions. They've been in the finals every time since they've joined. And yeah, it's great. So as a interesting, this is a bit of a diversion, talking back about technology and how distributed teams can work together. Here's an innovation project that some of the guys in Sydney did with HipChat. This is not something that we're looking to ship anytime soon, but I thought I'd show it to you because it shows how technology and things these days can be used to bring teams closer together. And maybe it'll get you thinking about something you could do with your own team.
Think about the millions of people our products touch every day. Now consider the billions we don't. What if it was possible to have a conversation with anyone in any language? Introducing BabelChat, real-time translation in your favorite chat client, HipChat. Meet Bruce. He runs a distributed team for a global company, with team members in Australia, Vietnam, Poland, and Brazil. This is an example of a HipChat conversation between Bruce and his team when one of the servers goes down. As Amanda types in Portuguese, her messages are translated instantly and appear in the local language of the receiver. The team can collaborate, despite each one of them using a different language. They can reach a common goal without speaking a common tongue. An indicator next to the message shows when it's been translated, and which language it's been translated from. A vote for Babel Chat is a vote for free speech. Really free speech.
Across the world is to make sure we coordinate the parties. So, we had a Saigon Golf Day on the same day as the Sydney Treasure Hunt to celebrate the Confluence 5.5 release. And the good thing about doing it on the same day as well is that you can prevent those jet setters that try and fly around and make sure they're at all the parties. So if you put them on the same day, there's no way they can do that. But it also makes it feel like it's one team rather than those guys are remote and separate to everybody else. Another one you might not think of is maybe your CEOs or vice presidents or whatever talk to the company or talk to your division on a regular basis about the strategy. I hope they do. If not, you should tell them to do that. We do a lot of all-hands presentations every month at Atlassian from the CEOs or the exec team. And for the first 6 to 12 months, it was my responsibility as the Vietnam office coordinator to replay those presentations to the team over there. So I'd get the slide deck and I would run through those presentations again to the Vietnam team so they knew what was going on with the rest of the company. And again, that gives them that context. They understand what the whole company is trying to achieve. They can make better decisions. They can improve their product skills and move themselves up that curve to autonomy. Hopefully over time, we'll be able to actually get the CEOs themselves to do the presentations to all those different offices, but they're going to have limited time. And so, if they can't do that, I think it's up to you as the advocates for those teams to really take responsibility, get a copy of those slides and replay them to the team. And, you need to maybe look at the legal and disclosure aspects of that potentially. But in our case, these guys are working exclusively for us. We make sure we have NDAs with the team, so there's really no reason why we can't share, the financial outcomes and stuff, the successes of the team with everyone around the world. I mentioned a couple of times about evaluation, and I think it's really important to measure your team for success. So we have a process that looks a little bit like this, where we have a survey that goes out to the staff on both sides to ask how the distributed team is going. We use the survey results, we turn that into feedback for the team. It's multiple choice questions and also long answers. And then that turns into a set of actions and quarterly goals for the team that we share with the team. So in our case, we have 7 areas that we're looking for the team to work on. And every quarter, we give them these results like this to say, how are they doing since the last survey? What are some recommendations? And the global management team that consists of managers in Sydney and managers in Saigon, we work together to coordinate our recommendations to the team and suggest on what we should improve. So as you can see there, some of it is about hiring more people and bringing on the right skill set for the distributed team. So, in order to get the decision-making skills up, we need to have product managers in place. Some of it's also about travel. So this can help justify things like travel expenses, budget for some of your team members to go over. If you have this quarterly process and you've got this data that shows that the team is not working effectively because they're letting down the team in this area, then that's a really good reason to justify spending maybe a couple of $1,000s on a trip for one of your leaders to go over and work with the team. The 7 areas that we use there, don't take them as gospel. You might have different areas that you want to assess. The key thing is to regularly review the areas that the team's working in, make sure they're improving, and put plans in place to improve them. We share all the raw data with the team as well, so that this survey information that comes back, we give all the raw results out to the team. We put these graphs up on our intranet so people can see how they're going. In the communication stuff, we've done a lot of work with English training for our team in Vietnam. We have English lessons for the whole team twice a week, 2 hours twice a week. And we also do one-on-one training for key leaders and key roles in the Vietnam team, or people that need extra help. And it's, again, looking at some of the countries where you're typically outsourcing to, the cost of doing these things is not expensive. It's mostly just the time to set it up is the main overhead. So if you can do this for your team and help get something set up where their English skills are going to improve, you know, this is a multi-year journey for you and for your company, so you should be willing to invest in these things that are going to make it a success in the long term. My last bit of advice for you is help the team find their own identity. And this is something that you need as the team trends towards autonomy. I've got a little video here that we used to tell the rest of the company about the identity of our Vietnam team. What it had in it, and I've snipped it down for you. In its original form, it had some jokes about the team and how they're working together. It had some cultural information about how they make dresses and different types of clothes in Vietnam. And it also had some interviews with the team members, and that's what I'm going to show you today. And the idea of that was just to fill in the team on who the Vietnam team is, what they're working on, and get everyone understanding why we have this new office and what they're good at.
Hello and welcome to Atlas News. I'm very proud today to bring you a segment special on Atlassian's trip to Asia. It was just over a year ago today that two pioneers, Jean-Michel Lemieux and Matt, I've just grown a beard, Ryall, embarked on a mission to build a new development centre in Asia. They wanted it to be kick-ass, they wanted it to be awesome, and in a year's time they wanted it to be huge. Now let's see some facts and fiction on the team in Vietnam. Over to you.
This is Ted on location in the Vietnam office, here with one of our team leads who will talk a little bit about themselves.
Hello, my name is Duy. I'm a team leader for Avenger team here. We have three sub-teams, bug fixing, SharePoint connector, and team calendar.
And which one of those is your favorite project to work on?
My favorite one is team calendar.
Hello, my name is Anatoly, and I'm here in Saigon in lovely Atlassian office talking to Phúc. And I've been speaking Vietnamese the whole day today, so my pronunciation is perfect. Phúc, can you tell us a little bit about what you do here in Atlassian?
So my name is Phúc. I am the QA in Atlassian.
Oh, great! And what team are you working on?
I'm working on Hobbit's team.
And what do Hobbits do?
We currently working on the files collaboration. We try to improve the file upload experience and centralize the files upload in one place.
Great.
So again, the team finding its own identity. They've used their Confluence space to an incredible degree. Some of the guys who are over there at the moment, Justice, who's over from our headquarters in Sydney for a year, he's taking the opportunity at every week he puts a blog post out about how awesome it is in Vietnam and how everyone should come over for a trip. And we'd really love to have people over there working with the team, because the challenge for us is not often the money, like to pay for someone to go over there. It's actually finding people who are the right level, so senior leaders in the company who can go over to Vietnam, leave their home, maybe move their family, and relocate there for a year or two. And so trying to get the company to think about that and invest in that is a big part of what my job has been and what Justice's role is now as a leader in the Vietnam office. But the team itself there, they are self-organizing now as well, as you can see. So they organize their own Dota championships. They're really into that. Karaoke, like I said, there's always a bunch of social events going on. They organize team outings, like I said, synchronized with stuff in Sydney, but also their own independent things now. And it's really important to get that team happening there to make it feel like it's a real Atlassian office. So just an example of random self-organization was one day someone in the office noticed that everybody was wearing a white shirt that day. And so in the HipChat room, they just said, hey, Vietnam, how about tomorrow everybody wears a blue shirt? And so suddenly they had blue shirt day, and then they had pink shirt day. And you know that trend just took off in the office again, because we have that kind of social group there that's kind of helping drive everything and make it feel like a great place to work. So it's been reformatted. So the key points I'd like to give you to take away are number one, to go and meet the team. Travel over to your new office. Meet the people that you're working with before you have to argue with them or debate with them over something. It's going to make those conversations much easier to hold. Share your plan, but also share your values with the team. Make sure you tell them why you're doing stuff. Share the company strategy, things like that. Face-to-face contact, make it more frequent. Make it all levels, not just the devs talking to each other, but the managers need to talk to each other as well. If you have meetings, regular scheduled meetings with a group of people in one office, you should be trying to include those people in the other office somehow, whether that's you do that every second week or something like that if the time's inconvenient. Communicate asynchronously. Use HipChat as a logbook. Use Confluence in ways that optimize your development process around asynchronous communication. Track decisions so that people understand the background, why you made this decision, what you've thought about, maybe what you haven't thought about, so that they can provide input and correct course if things have been done the wrong way. Reinforce the culture you want. Send people over there for training. Do the same training every quarter as new people come on board so that you're reinforcing the same message over and over again. Again, they won't get it via osmosis, so you have to really go hard on some of that stuff. Be overly inclusive. Think about subtle ways that you might be excluding the team and really go hard to be more inclusive than you think you should be, and that's probably about right. Measure for success. Set your goals. Track them. Use surveys to get feedback from the team. That feedback is invaluable. Share it with the team as well so that they have visibility in how they're going. And lastly, help the team find their own identity. And once they're a success, things will take off from there. So that's all from me. Thanks very much.
And Matt, we do have a couple questions that came up.
Sure. Yeah, I saw this one. Thanks to whoever posted this before the presentation. Yeah, it's interesting to talk about distributed teams versus remote teams. I try to avoid using the term remote team, actually, because it implies that they're remote from somewhere else. And I want the teams to feel more even and feel like they're more even partners in a broader distributed team. And so it's not like there's a main team and then there's a remote team. There's actually a distributed team that includes everybody. And they're equal partners in that. Even the people that might be working from home in a different location, they can be part of a distributed team too. I think from my presentation, hopefully you've understood that it covers all kinds of teams. Teams with split between 1 or 2 locations, or also with lone rangers, people out working from home and things like that. Babel chat, how can we vote to prioritize it? That's a good question. Come and talk to me afterwards, and we can talk about Babel chat. I think yeah, wow, okay. So all that's doing actually is remotely, automatically using Google Translate to translate the messages. So that's interesting. Good feedback. Come and talk to me and we can talk about that one. Tactics, fully distributed team with no brick and mortar office. That's probably a challenge. Probably what you need to think about with this one is you need to look at good examples in the open source community. So the open source community is probably the example of successful projects that don't have any central location. And things like the Mozilla Foundation and Apache Foundation, those guys meet maybe once a year. They have like a conference or something where they actually get all their people together, and that's where they use to kind of align people. I think if you want to have a fully distributed team working on, even for a company to be successful, I think you need to be even more aligned than those open source projects are. So you're going to need to do what they do, probably once a quarter or more frequently. You're going to need to just get people face to face to agree on the strategy, work out how you're going to split up the work, and then use those kind of asynchronous communication tools as well to try and help things work out. I think it would be quite different with this as well, depending on whether people are in the same time zone or not. So if you're all in the same time zone, you can use certain things that are going to work better, like using a permanent Google Hangout or something like that, where people can jump in quickly for video chat with each other. But if you have a distributed team also across time zones, it's going to be really hard. That's a few suggestions. I think that probably deserves its own presentation from someone who's worked this way. I haven't worked in that environment, unfortunately, or fortunately, maybe. Selection process for our outsourcing partner. So we're in the fortunate position where we have pretty good reach with our marketing, with our blogs and our brand name. And so the start of the process was we put a blog post up on blogs.atlassian.com just announcing the fact that we're looking for an Asian partner and or somewhere within 5 hours of Sydney, which could have been New Zealand, could have been somewhere in Polynesia maybe, but pretty much in Asia. And from that process, from just putting that blog out, we got those 78 applications or whatever it was from different companies. And from there, we had a process of basically filtering them down. So the filtering process, part of the application process was to provide a summary of your organization. So we were looking for companies that were roughly the same size as us, so from 100 to 1,000 people kind of thing, willing to grow with us over time, a team that already had some experience and had a management structure in place, so not really like a really small startup or anything like that. And so based on the application, people put in answers to questions like, what are some of the great things you've built recently? And people could give us some examples of stuff they built for different companies. I forget the other questions, maybe something about feature development as well, like how do you decide between two competing features, things like that. Those were the kind of things where we thought we could really discriminate on. Like most people can build stuff, most people can probably build it on time, but can people understand how to build products and what's important to customers? That's really the aspect that we're looking for. And so once we narrowed it down through that initial application process, we did interviews with 30, not that many, must have been about 20 companies. Again, over Skype, did a lot of, looks like I'm over time. Do I need to wrap up?
You can finish this
All right,
question.
I'll finish this question. So the next stage was a pilot project. So we got them to build something for us. And again, looking at the pilot, we were just trying to work out, can they take a set of requirements and build something that's actually usable as a feature? It was a label manager for Confluence. And based on that, we got 7 or 8 teams to build that. And from that, we picked the winner. And we've been really happy with the team we picked. So our partner is actually called Pyramid Consulting. And they're based, they're actually a Belgian company, but they have all their development offices are in Saigon. And we've been partnered with them for 18 months now. So yeah, thanks.
Great,
thanks very
thank
much.
you.